I've got two almost teenage kids, and they are in one tiny bedroom. So we've thrown the entire house into chaos, and I'm kind of hiding here during this podcast. If you hear any sort of noises, like that's my wife packing. If there's like a loud crash, a stack of boxes has fallen down or something, do not panic. Meanwhile, though, Brian Stinson is here, and Brian works on the community infrastructure team, which does Fedora and CentOS infrastructure at Red Hat. And he's been a CentOS contributor for a long time and is now brought into the Fedora fold. So we have this project for continuous integration, which of Fedora as an operating system. Basically, as packagers make changes to their packages, those get automatically tested. And that's kind of been a project in progress for a while. So I wanted to check with Brian about the current state of things. And Brian is at Jenkins World right now, so hopefully his Wi-Fi will hold up for us. And we will hear what he has to say. Welcome, Brian. And everybody else, put your system on mute, please. There's some noise coming from somewhere.
Yeah, thank you very much. And actually, the noise might be me. I'm sitting here, behind the conference floor and all that. So I hope it's not too bad. But so, like Matt said, my name is Brian Stinson. I work. Most of my day job is spent on doing the CentOS CI infrastructure. We do a number of different things, but today I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing in relation to Fedora, and then have a few just sort of updates along the way of what we're doing. So to give a little bit of an idea of sort of what we do, we've got three major, I guess you could call them projects or interest areas of where CentOS CI and Fedora kind of overlap a little bit. So like I said, CentOS CI, we think of it like a set of infrastructure that's available to a bunch of projects, but Fedora is kind of is a first-class citizen in CentOS CI in a number of different ways. Like Matt said, the actual testing of the operating system itself happens through the Fedora CI pipeline. We host that in our infrastructure, and that's one of the things that we make sure to take care of. There's a number of different groups that actually work on that, and I have a slide on that in just a minute. But yeah, we provide the base level, the machines, the OpenShift instance, everything that is required for that CI pipeline to run runs in the CentOS CI infrastructure, and that gives us a couple of kind of cool opportunities because number one, it's a good partnership between the CentOS project and the Fedora project. Even as top level projects when you're not even thinking about the distributions themselves. But it's also kind of a place where when you have a targeted set of infrastructure like CentOS CI, you get a set of developers who are thinking about testing and can sort of help each other and things like that. So that's really great. And so that's probably the most active project that is in CentOS CI at the moment. The one that's doing the most actual workloads and stuff is the Fedora CI pipeline. We actually build off of every commit to dist-git. There's a pipeline that actually runs for each pull request that developers submit to dist-git. And then if there's a test directory in the format that we've kind of worked out in the Fedora community, then that stuff gets all run and for it at each of those levels. So commit, pull request, and things like that. So it's a really kind of a neat pipeline to watch if you can find it. I'll talk about some of the pain points and things in just a minute. But another thing, since most of the CentOS infrastructure team and the Fedora infrastructure teams have been combined, during our day jobs and stuff. One thing that we've sort of benefited from that is being able to provide a little bit of support to the Fedora infra team. as they're building out their applications, like Bodhi and Pagure and the things that you hit when you are a Fedora contributor. If it's built by the infra team, we want to provide testing support for those folks as well, so that they don't have to go out and do Travis CI, Circle CI, and figure all of that out separately for each of their individual projects. We want to kind of give a central way and a central infrastructure for them to get that stuff done. And then finally, this one is probably the furthest relation to the Fedora project, but it's probably going to become more interesting as things go on. So the upstream testing project is something that we're looking at in CentOS CI. It was sort of our original mission for the infrastructure, was to take projects that are interesting to the CentOS project and provide them a place that they can test and build and do stuff on top of CentOS. So the idea here, which again I'll kind of talk about in a minute, but the idea here is targeting projects that are critical or that we care a lot about, or that have a big impact in our communities. We want to be sure that they have a good place to validate their stuff on top of the Linux distributions that we put out. And so that's what this upstream testing project is all about.
Can you give an example of something that would be using that?
Sure. Yeah. So an example of that, we first started off in CentOS CI targeting the RDO project, which is a distribution of OpenStack that's built via RPMs. And so that was really interesting to us as the CentOS project, because they built and delivered all of that on top of CentOS. They're actually delivered in our mirror network and things like that. We do want to expand off into other upstream projects, like the CPython community, or the other language stacks that are out there, because we as Linux distributions are affected by those projects. So we want to be sure that CPython has a good place to test their latest releases on top of both the Fedora releases that are out there, the CentOS releases that are out there, and kind of everything in between. So we'll talk a little bit about each of those projects here, and like I said, we'll start with the Fedora CI project. I put this graphic up at my talk at Flock, and not to sort of toot my own horn a little bit, but that was a really good, not necessarily the talk itself, but the discussion afterwards. That was a really good discussion that we had. And so I'd encourage you, if you can, go back and kind of recall that if you were there, or I have a write-up that I still haven't put out yet, but yeah, we got some really good feedback from the community there.
It seems like things in Fedora are dangerously prone to having graphs that split off into fractal dimensions infinitely in every direction.
Yeah, so I was with this graphic, I was trying to sort of capture who all is involved in some way or another in the Fedora CI process. And so this is again the pipeline that runs on changes to dist-git. And there's a number of them. We've got I couldn't even fit them all on this particular graphic, but there's a lot of activity going on, and there's a lot of individual pieces that are sort of moving here. We've got to sort of pay attention to a bunch of different libraries, different software things that people are working on, different pieces of documentation people are putting together, and then at the end of the day, these are all separate groups that are doing these things. So the Factory 2 team kind of works together on their own, and the Fedora infrastructure team kind of works together on their own. The CentOS CI team we kind of work together on our own, and we do talk to each other as much as we can. But having things kind of spread out like this is it's a lot to keep track of, and it's sort of a big undertaking. But we're making some progress in kind of helping mitigate some of the negative effects of being spread out like this. And I think most of these teams are doing a really good job of trying to figure out what that looks like. So our current activity for this, these are the I guess you'd sort of call them the action level items that we're working on. Getting the test results into Bodhi, that was kind of one thing that we it just sort of worked out because of the way that we disabled the gating process in the past and things like that. Developers weren't actually getting the feedback that they needed from the CI pipeline. So we'd actually been running the pipeline for quite a long time, but it was really hard for them to actually go back and find the log information, even the test status if it passed or failed,
or even to remember that those tests were running. For my experience,
right,
because I set up some tests for one of my packages, and then I promptly forgot about it, and then eventually I got a PR from somebody saying, "Hey, your tests are broken," which I accepted. Right. Thanks, but I'd forgotten that I've even made those tests.
Right. Yeah, and that's that was a big problem. That is a big problem that shouldn't have. That was something that we kind of missed, but we're definitely working on that. There's a PR pending to get all of that information back into Bodhi, and that's separate from the actual gating discussion and things like that, because at the very least we want developers to have that information, whether we gate on it or not. We want them to be able to go back and reach back into the logs. So we're starting with the individual test statuses, and I know the logs themselves are not really there's a lot of extra information in those that are that's not really relevant to the developer. It's relevant to me as an infrastructure guy, but we want to be sure that we get them a test status and then a link to a log that actually makes sense to someone as a packager, and not necessarily they don't have to care about which particular node all of their pods were scheduled on, which is like I said, something I care about, but not something that they care about.
So are pods a Jenkins things as well, or are those Kubernetes pods?
Yeah, so these are Kubernetes pods. The way that the infrastructure is set up is we run a Jenkins master in OpenShift that actually handles all of the triggers coming out of dist-git. And then Jenkins actually has the pipeline itself is actually defined a pod specification for what a test runner container looks like. And so Jenkins will go out and instantiate a new instance of that test runner container. It'll take the RPM that is the output of whatever change you just made to dist-git, and then inject it into a VM that's actually running on a pod in OpenShift.
Wow, that's
so
cool.
it's kind of like turtles all the way down, but it helps because we can take the Fedora cloud images, inject in an RPM, and then run a whole bunch of tasks. That's kind of the way that everything's orchestrated, and it turned out to be a really easy way to get things done, because we have things like the standard test interface and things like that. That's how people are actually writing their tests in dist-git, and so it allowed the folks working on the CI pipeline to do that. Kind of it sounds a little crazy, running a VM on top of a container on top of all of that stuff, but it sounds a little crazy, but it actually simplified things quite a bit, because we did the work in the community beforehand to do that standard test interface, and so that's helped a lot.
Yeah, that's cool. I have more sidetrack questions, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah, not at all.
You could use the Fedora cloud image. Do you use that because it's a minimal image we produce, or do you use it because it has cloud in it and you use cloud in it for the images?
So it was basically just a minimal image to start from, and it's it's fairly small that we can actually pull that down and then get it booted up pretty quickly.
Do you
We
use
don't
Cloud Init?
we don't actually use Cloud Init in that instance.
That's what I
So
suspected. We need to make a Fedora minimal server image that is not cloud image for these use cases.
yeah,
That's not to do with you, but that's with our overall edition strategy that we need to figure out. So that's really helpful, actually.
yeah,
Um,
that makes sense.
and I have one more completely separate question about the slide and Bodhi in particular. So for probably everybody who is interested in following this conversation knows this already, but if you don't, Bodhi is our engine for producing updates to Fedora. So if you build a package that is going to be going into either a stable release like Fedora 28 right now, or a release that's branched and ready to be put into production eventually, like Fedora 29 right now, use Bodhi to put together that update. So you build the package, but it doesn't automatically go out until the packager goes and takes the manual steps in Bodhi to make it go. That's too many steps. I'd like to get that down. But anyways, that's the process right now. One of the big kind of holes we have is that we do not use Bodhi in Rawhide, which is the development branch. You just build a package and then it shows up in Rawhide without going through Bodhi. Uh, is that changing as part of this? Are we going to put Rawhide things through Bodhi? And if not, how are those getting gated?
Yeah, so that's kind of a separate discussion. So at least from the CI group, I think we have a couple of priorities before we worry too much about rawhide gating and things like that. I know that is a separate initiative that's happening, and if the way that works out, I think is probably just gonna we'll have to figure out what that looks like and then tailor the CI pipeline to fit into that model. But we've got two priorities at the moment for this CI work, as it exists right now, and that's to get the results for the branches into Bodhi so that we have something that we can show the developer. But on down the road, we need to start showing this information in more places. So if you raise a pull request, what we want to do is have that actually communicated back to source.fedoraproject.org on the pull request directly, rather than because there wouldn't be a Bodhi update for that particular activity either. So there's a few places where we need to actually communicate this information back. Getting the the release branch information into Bodhi on an update is kind of the first step that we kind of have to come with that as table stakes before we can actually put some of this information out elsewhere. So
Yeah. Okay, thanks. That makes perfect sense to me, and I'm in favor of biting off manageable chunks and showing that they work, because that's a good way to actually get things done.
Yeah. So it was nice too, because getting the released test information back into Bodhi, that's a really so far it's looking like a simple-ish change. And then we can go on and see what that looks like, because a lot of the communication that we're doing actually falls into the second point there. There was a discussion on the CI list a while ago about reworking the messaging formats that are coming out of various CI systems, and kind of turning the formats into a thing that makes sense for both OpenQA, which is a system used by the QA group, by the CI pipeline, by another system that someone might want to use. We want to be sure that if you are doing something related to CI and it affects the packages in dist-git, we want a streamlined and consistent messaging format for all of those systems. And that was they kind of designed the CI pipeline to begin with a particular message thing in mind, and it needs to just kind of converge on some of the formats that are coming out of other systems. And so that's I put a link into the Pagure project that they're using to work on that as of an actual specification that we can refer back to for these different CI systems. And so that work is actually going to we want that work to happen before we do a whole lot of other communication back into various places like Pagure PRs and things like that, because we want to be sure that we have a stable message set before we get onto too much. But
okay, cool. My pet place I'd really like to see is in the fed package build command. I would love to see it have that tell me about CI.
Yeah, so I actually have that. That's on a couple slides later. I'll talk about some outcomes that we're looking for. Awesome. And so the third one here is just adding more tests to dist-git, because right now a lot of the testing is opt-in to you have to actually, as a developer, put a whole bunch of tests in your directory and all that stuff. What we heard at Flock was it would be nice, especially for language stack packages like think Python or Ruby or Go libraries or something like that. A lot of times there are some basic things that you can do right off right from the start to have a basic set of tests. So for Python, an example was given that you basically install the RPM, run Python, and import the module. And if that breaks, well, that's kind of a problem. And so we want a way to do those sort of higher order tests that apply to thousands of packages, and then run them through the same pipeline that we do for the rest of the changes to dist-git. And working out how to do that mechanically is that's kind of still in, but there's a couple of different schools of thought on that. But yeah, that's a pending discussion. And then also, lastly, updating the documentation. Just all of this stuff has changed so quickly over the past few months that I know some of the CI pages are just kind of they're a little bit out of date, or don't mention some of the new things that we've actually done, and adding links to actually getting the logs and what the process actually looks like now that we've had a few months of development time on the pipeline is something that we're interested in. We can move on a little bit. I'll kind of breeze through this little bit, because so this is that second project that I mentioned, or the focus area that we have for Fedora Infra support. We actually took over a Jenkins master that was run by the Fedora infrastructure team, and this was just a place where people could come in and stand up a job real quick, or they were working on a project in Pagure.io, and they needed a place to actually run their tests, and they didn't want to go out to Travis or something like that. And so the Fedora infrastructure team provided a place for them to do that, and a number of different execution environments to do that. So if you can kind of read that tiny print on the slide, over there on the left-hand side, you can kind of see some of the different offerings that are there. There's EL6, EL7, and then all of the released Fedoras that are available for tagging from your job. So if you need to run some tests on Fedora 26, you can. We still have an agent for that. You can still tag your jobs for that if you want 28, 29. as those come in, the idea is to add those into this master, and then you can just tag your jobs directly to it. The most of the Fedora infrastructure team had actually put their tests for the different applications in here. The Fedora applications that you interact with on a day-to-day basis as a Fedora contributor. A lot of those tests were in here as well. And that is nice because you have a place to run all those tests. But at the same time, this was a lot of administrative overhead for the Fedora infrastructure team. They didn't want to keep maintaining this Jenkins master and all of the agents and all of that stuff. And so we actually took that over for them. This screenshot that you see right here is the new master that's running in our OpenShift environment, and we actually lifecycle it with the rest of them. So there's a process that we have if there's an update to the Jenkins Docker image, we actually cascade that through all of our tenants after we've tested it and stuff. And so you get an updated, latest stable Jenkins master that is kind of, it's less management for the Fedora infra team. And then, we're maintaining these static agents as well for now, just as we kind of go along with these projects. The current activity for the Fedora infra support side of the house is we've got Bodhi and Pagger. Those two projects have been running their CI on ci.centos.org for a while. We want to get to the place where we're adding more groups from the Fedora infrastructure team, but those are kind of the two flagships that are actually running their unit test suites. Whenever they do a commit to the upstream project itself, the tests actually run on ci.centos.org. And this is, again, this is a separate thing from the Fedora CI pipeline. This is just another part of the CentOS CI infrastructure that we've been on both as the two projects that are coming together. We're working on, so I mentioned the static agents that we have in that master that we took over from the Fedora infrastructure team. One thing that we're working on in CentOS CI as an infrastructure is to be able to do Fedora VMs in the flagship ci.centos.org property. So this would be, again, outside the pipeline. But one thing we found, even with the folks that were traditionally more focused on CentOS, they still wanted a way to actually run the rest of their unit test suite on something newer, and that would be Fedora. And so both for them but also for the Fedora communities, we want to get them into our dynamic provisioner so that you can actually request and check out machines, Fedora machines, just like you would a CentOS machine in the CI environment. And to do that, we kind of want to focus on the individual projects that are in that master. So you saw a long list of jobs there. It's going to take a little bit of time to actually go through and walk down the list and make sure that they're ready for such a change. But we want to help them actually move over to, instead of tagging a particular agent that's already set up, we want to have them dynamically provision that agent and then bring along their dependencies. Because one of the management overheads that we had is each of those, we have to install all of the dependencies that every project might need to do their tests. And that was they have to open an infra ticket and say, okay, my project requires this package, and then we'd have to turn around and add that to our templates and push it out and install the package, things like that. Whereas with dynamic provisioning, you basically get a fresh Fedora VM, you install whatever you want on it, you've got root, you can do all of that stuff, run your tests, and then we tear down the VM or the machine itself later on, and you just go from there. It's a little bit cleaner to do it that way than we have done things in the past. So that's one thing that we're actually in the middle of that right now. There's a couple of folks on my team who have offered to help with the patches that we need to get that going. So I'm hoping to get that wrapped up, within a few weeks of getting Fedora VMs in there. And one thing that is nice about having the Fedora infrastructure and the CentOS infrastructure teams working so closely together is that we can kind of, we have a little bit closer communication with each other. And so we've suggested that if there are any new infrastructure projects, we'll definitely want to get them into ci.centos.org first. Instead of going through either that old master that we have or going out to another service. And that's just a communication thing that is nice to have between our two teams.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I am glad to see that. CentOS has been part of the official Red Hat family for a while, and it's taken us a long time to get to a good collaborative working place between Fedora and CentOS. So it's awesome to see that happening. Before I came to Red Hat, I was a heavy CentOS user and Fedora user and Fedora contributor. So it's just awesome to see it coming together.
Yeah, it's turned out to be a really beneficial thing for us too, because just getting advice from the Fedora infrastructure team as well, because they have a pretty good set of best practices for actually writing tests, where we have kind of a little bit more of an expertise of managing infrastructure to run the tests, and it was kind of it's been a really good mix so far. We've been able to get a lot of things done, so that's good. And then the last focus area that I wanted to talk a little bit about is upstream and project testing. And like I said, this has been pretty so far. This has been pretty insular to the CentOS community at the moment. We've been focusing on our special interest groups. So like I said, RDO is one kind of big tenant that we have. We run some of the tests for OpenShift Origin. We have a group that actually builds RPMs coming out of the OpenShift Origin project, or the OKD project now. They run their tests there. We have Gluster and Ceph and folks like that who are actually building on top of the operating system. It's important for us to target those projects and sort of give them a place. And so we have a few of those projects onboarded into our ci.centos.org property. One thing that we, I guess two things that we want to do. We want to explore doing, especially for the CentOS special interest groups, we want to explore using the Fedora CI pipeline, the software itself, to actually run some of the tests that those folks are working on. Because when it comes down to it, the special interest groups are kind of a packaging effort, and the activities that they do look a lot like what goes on in Fedora dist-git. And so we want, whenever they make a change to their spec files or things like that, we want to run a Fedora CI style job on the work that they're actually doing, because that, same workload, same types of activities that are going on. But we also want to, one more focus that we have in this sort of area is expanding the reach of CentOS CI to other projects that, maybe we don't, we as CentOS Linux don't really have a good story on, but maybe Fedora does. We want to be a place that upstream projects can come and get their testing done. So if you have suggestions, I'd love to hear what you have to say, because we're definitely going out and sort of knocking on doors and asking people if they have heard about testing, and so that's kind of an effort that we have.
I have. Does DNF run CI stuff here?
I don't believe that DNF runs CI there.
Because we've been having some, struggles with this release in
Sure.
DNF, and it seems like CI might have helped with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's yeah. I'll take that down. That's definitely something that we can take a look at. So
Yeah, and
I'll see about approaching that.
rather than just yelling at them that they're breaking everything, it would be nice to say, "Hey, we've got these resources that could maybe make everybody's life easier." Is a better story than the complaining.
Right. Right. Yeah. So that's yeah. I'll take a note of that and see if we can reach out to those folks, because I know there's the DNF team has done a little bit of work in the CentOS SIG space, and so I think we at least know who to talk to for that. So
Awesome. Thank you very much.
And so this is the outcomes that were I mentioned the outcome slide that I'm looking at. This is kind of what we're hoping to do over the next a little bit of time here. Like I said, we're looking to have Fedora VMs in CentOS CI over the next few weeks. This is that second bullet, Matt, is the thing that you're looking for, better tooling in Fedora Packager for Fedora CI.
Okay.
So this is something that we've reached out to some of the other groups about, the folks actually working on those tools in our package and other places. But it's something that we as CentOS Linux are also going to be interested in, and so this is another opportunity for us to kind of work together on things. There's a project ongoing that was announced at Flock that we're looking to merge and combine some of the Git repositories that make up dist-git. And that's going to be really important for both of our projects, because it just expands the contributor base, both for the package specs, but also for the tests and things like that. So someone coming in from the CentOS community can have a good idea what's going on in the Fedora community, and that stuff just sort of cross-populates, and having a shared instance of, or the combined instance of dist-git, where all of our branches are more or less living together, it makes things a lot easier for doing CI as well, as well as actually building things. So that's going to be important for us. I mentioned the work that we're doing with the Fedora infrastructure teams, and what I'd like to do is talk with those developers about doing a kind of a, call it a template, where if you want to stand up a new infra app, or if someone out he actually wants to stand up an app like Fedora infrastructure does, we want to provide them a template that automatically does the right thing with their test suite. It's in the standard test interface. It's in the right frameworks that we need, so that we can get them onboarded quickly into CentOS CI. And then the last few things are just.
Oh, I lost hearing Brian. Did anybody else?
Yeah, I lost him.
Uh-oh, the conference Wi-Fi might have got us there.
But
I hope we get.
Just as we
lost you for a minute there, Brian. Hold on. Let's see. I hear conference noise, but I do not hear Brian speaking. Maybe he was like kidnapped by Jenkins people.
Should we have our backup Brian give pithy one-liners?
Yes, go back up, Brian. Let's hear some stand-up.
If you're live by the Wi-Fi, you die by the Wi-Fi. All right, that's all I got.
That you're kind of on the spot there, so I'm gonna forgive that. It's disconnected. Connected. Aha, you're back again.
There we go. Let's.
Yeah.
I think folks are showing up here at Jenkins World. So.
Yeah. Last thing we heard there was the last few things, I think.
Yeah. So let's take a look at some outcomes. So this should be our last few things. So. Yeah, I can start at the top here again and kind of go through what.
Yeah, we heard most of this. It was getting down to the bottom of the slide.
Okay, yeah. So the I think the main thing out of that we heard out of Flock was just from you, Matthew, the tooling in there, also updated documentation on the CI namespace in the wiki. So. Just making sure that that's up to date and having a good landing page for someone coming in. Most of that documentation in there is actually meant for, it was meant for those of us that were putting this whole thing together in the first place. And so it's really, it's kind of in the weeds of implementation when really we need some actual developer focused documentation and to put that on the front page. And so that's kind of one of the outcomes that we're looking at the next little bit. And finally, expanding the infrastructure. We have a number of nodes in OpenShift, but as groups come on board, we get a couple of weeks of them kind of kicking the tires, and then the first question we get is, okay, how much can we abuse this? Because we have folks coming along and they want to do large scale integration tests, and I know the Fedora CI pipeline is going to start expanding off into doing other things besides just running the unit tests on the packages. And so making sure that we keep up with the demand is both a challenge and an opportunity for us, because we can we've got some pretty good capacity here to expand this off.
Okay.
So that was the last little bit. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, and yeah.
I think I've asked
Brian,
most of
we had
my
a
questions.
question come in
Oh.
IRC.
Awesome. Go ahead, Ben.
Basically, the gist of it is there's a concern about a lack of public communication and traffic on the CI list. Looking at the archives, there are 5 people posting in the last 30 days and very few posts. So I'm wondering if you could speak to the status and how this can be more publicly visible.
Sure. Yeah. So I think I think one of the problems that we've had there, like I said, if we go back to this this slide right here, this is something that we're trying to figure out amongst the few of us, just because there's so many people that are, or so many teams even, that are doing things related to both the Fedora CI pipeline, but also the infrastructure itself. That's the point is well taken that there hasn't been much public communication on that list, and that's something that we can do better about. But it's going to take some coordination with all these teams to figure out what that communication looks like. But I'll take that as a concrete action point from this meeting.
conference is really kicking off.
Yeah, it's getting loud out here.
Yeah, I think probably it's time to wrap up the call here then. Thank you very much, Brian, for all of your feedback or your update on everything and answering all my questions along the way. I think we've got a lot of exciting potential here, and it seems like we're really close to having this be generally useful for all of Fedora, and that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited about it.
Does anybody else have any questions? So much silence. Okay, Brian, if people in the future or people watching this
No.
have... Oh.
I don't have any questions. Is that better?
Yes. No, that's worse. If people do have questions after watching this or in the future, is that the Fedora CI list a good place to go? Where's a good place to get more information and to ask questions about the information that's out there?
Yeah, so there's definitely check out the CI namespace on the wiki. That's going to have some contact information right on the front page there pretty shortly, I hope. But also CI at list.fedoraproject.org is the place to check that out there.
Okay, cool. Thank you again, Brian. Again, this has been excellent. I don't know what we're going to do next month for this, but next week we'll be back on IRC for the Fedora Council meetings. If you watching this have suggestions for parts of Fedora that you would like to hear from, comment on this video, send me messages, send me Twitter posts, whatever you like, and we'll try and fit those things in. Or if you would like to share something that you're working on. And again, thank you, everybody. See you online.